a hearty welcome to one and all. We're back in the studio for episode 216 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday morning here with me in New York. We're going to skip past all that promotional jazz, and we're going to get right to the guts of the episode. So on June 12th, I did an episode on the John McTiernan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura collaboration Predator. A big hit movie, an action film, but I argue that technically it's a horror film more so than an action film. But that movie was released to theaters on June 12th, 1987. Well, there was another movie that was released on that same day, June 12th, 1987, another movie I absolutely adore, also kind of a horror movie, but I figured it deserved its own episode. That movie is George Miller's amazing adaptation of John Updike's novel, The Witches of Eastwick. Now, time changes perspective. And I first watched The Witches of Eastwick when it premiered on HBO, probably right around this time in 1988. The HBO turnaround was like 10, 11, 12 months. So if a film came out in June of 87, by June of 88, it was premiering on HBO, Cinemax, or if you had the Movie Channel and Showtime, or if you had them all. But that was an HBO and Cinemax film. I believe HBO actually had a hand in the production of that movie, if I'm not mistaken. But when I first watched the movie, I was 14 years old, your typical angst-ridden, sweaty, horny 14-year-old kid who didn't think that he was ever going to even kiss a girl. And I'm watching in this movie, now I love him, Jack Nicholson as Daryl Van Horn. Is he the devil? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Are the women witches? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe it's just all a fever dream, a lucid dream. Who the fuck knows? But I did not, at the time, the film was entertaining, had some laughs, but I did not accept that these three hot women, Susan Sarandon, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Cher, what are they doing hooking up with this old guy? To my virginal 14-year-old eyes, Jack Nicholson was an old man. He was retirement age. He probably already is retired. Watched the movie again not that long ago. I think Jack Nicholson was younger when this movie was shot than I am now. That hurts. That hurts. Because I can no longer say, hey, what the fuck? Nicholson is like ready to be put out to pasture. No, he's not. No more than I am. Just for the record. So the movie got pretty good reviews, not great. And it was a box office success, but not as big of a hit as I think that it should have been. Because on top of the fact that the women are all amazing, crafting clearly delineated, distinctive characters, all three of them. And you had great supporting actors and actresses, like Veronica Cartwright is kind of somebody who could go both ways. Some of her performances, I think, are incredible, and others just disastrous. But Richard Jenkins, a fantastic character actor, plays a big role. He's Michelle Pfeiffer's boss. He runs a local newspaper. It's nothing but great performances, surprising turns to plot, and Jack Nicholson seeming to be having the time of his life. Now, there are those who have said and would say he gives the same performance in The Witches of Eastwick as he does 2 years later in Batman, the Tim Burton original with Michael Keaton. I don't agree with that. To my eyes, the Joker appears to be a much more taxing role on him. And Jack talked about how he didn't necessarily have such a great time making that movie, that it was stressful, it was arduous. In this movie, in The Witches of Eastwick, he is letting it rip. And there are certain films in Jack's career where he appears to be enjoying as boring and mundane as shooting a movie can be. You spend 10 hours of the day in a trailer and you work for 5 minutes, and then the next day it's more of the same. It can be a soul-crushing, mind-numbing experience. But there are movies where it looks to my eyes that Jack had a blast. It looks to me that he had an absolute home run of a time making The Witches of Eastwick. When I think of other movies, do I think that he enjoyed himself? I don't think he had fun making Ironweed. I don't think he had fun making Reds with Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton. I think he enjoyed making Something's Gotta Give, also with Diane Keaton. That was a movie which was a big hit, playing the closest approximation to how Jack probably was in real life, in his 60s, only dating women under 25, quote unquote. The film, though, is also notable for the fact that Cher had top 5 greatest individual years for a Hollywood star that I can think of. 1987, she had 3 huge Hollywood movies, all produced under the studio banner. They were all box office hits to one degree or another, and in most cases, working with big directors. She won the Best Actress award for Moonstruck, 4 films released in 1987. That's directed by Norman Jewison, all-timer, right? He did The Hurricane with Denzel 25 years ago. He did In the Heat of the Night with Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier in the 60s. Home run hitter. If you ask me, oh, and I'm sorry, the other movie she did, Suspect, with Dennis Quaid and Liam Neeson and Joe Mantegna. Just an incredible cast, a fantastic suspense mystery thriller. Directed by Peter Yates, who did Breaking Away. He did Bullet with Steve McQueen in the 60s. So she's working with home run hitters that whole year. Tremendous actors and actresses in her midst in those movies. If you ask me, I feel like Cher's performance is better in The Witches of Eastwick than it is in Moonstruck. I like Moonstruck. Danny Aiello is great. Olympia Dukakis won the Best Supporting Actress. She's a riot. Nicolas Cage does his wacky routine that he's famous for, going nuts. Cher's Brooklyn accent kind of comes and goes. And an argument was made a decade later when Helen Hunt won the Best Actress award for As Good as It Gets, starring who? Who? Jack Nicholson. He won Best Actor. Helen Hunt won Best Actress. But Helen Hunt's accent kind of comes and goes depending on what part of the story we're at. Takes you out of the fiction. Cher's Brooklyn accent does not sustain itself in Moonstruck. That's my problem with the performance. But in the movie The Witches of Eastwick, although theoretically the 3 women, witches, if they are witches, I don't know, Cher's character, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon, they get more or less equal screen time. Maybe Cher's character, Alexandra, maybe she gets slightly more screen time. But she dominates. Every scene she's in, she's vibrant. She shines. More so than in the other 2 movies I named. I mean, if you ask me, Suspect is Dennis Quaid's movie. And we all know I love Dennis Quaid. I've talked about him repeatedly on the channel. But The Witches of Eastwick is a fantastic film. It has all the components of a comedy and all the components of a horror film. And until Scream in the 90s, which was much more overt, blending comedy and horror was not done that much. It isn't the easiest thing to do because the audience for a comedy is not necessarily going to be the same for an audience for a horror film. And in 1981, John Landis made a movie that I love. It's in my top 10 favorite horror films, American Werewolf in London. But American Werewolf in London is often mistakenly referred to as a comedy rather than a horror film with comedic elements. See, this is where with genre, it doesn't really matter. Nobody cares. You don't have to be precise. The Witches of Eastwick has elements of the horror film, and it's a comedy. The actors and actresses, they give it everything they've got the whole way through. And I feel like the movie has aged well. Maybe it just didn't hit people properly in 87. Maybe they weren't ready for a movie like this. But I think this is a film that you can pick up and watch today if you haven't seen it, and you'll be dazzled. And it's the sort of film where you say, I didn't know that Cher made this movie. I didn't remember Jack Nicholson. Really? And that's when you sometimes discover a movie that you didn't know even existed, and you're taken aback by, holy crap, I had no idea. So the basic setup of the film is that Cher as Alexandra and Michelle Pfeiffer as Suki. Susan Sarandon plays a violin instructor, Jane, I forgot her name. The 3 of them, they're all divorced. They all have, Susan Sarandon I don't think has a kid. That I'm not sure of. But Michelle Pfeiffer and Cher, they both have kids. And they are unhappily divorced. They're happy that they're rid of their guy, their husbands, but they need something exciting in their life. And there is a fantastic early scene where the 3 women, they're drinking wine, and they seem to be conjuring weird shit in the atmosphere as if they're witches, but they're not doing it deliberately. They don't know that they have these powers if in fact they have these powers. So they don't say anything out of pocket, but we have an idea of what they're talking about. And when there is a cut, as the women start to become intoxicated, and Michelle Pfeiffer, who's very young at the time, such incredible features, she gets almost a mischievous little smile on her face, kind of bites her lip, and she just says the word huge, just like that. And Cher cracks up. Susan Sarandon doesn't laugh. So we get the idea that Michelle Pfeiffer, her fantasy man, and they're all talking about guys and what kind of guy each one of them needs in their life right now. Michelle Pfeiffer wants a guy who is well endowed. Let's be kind and we'll call it like that. So she says well endowed. She says huge. And Susan Sarandon, with a straight face, goes small. And the women are ripping on, hey, what are you talking about? And she says, listen, my first husband was huge. There are times I just can't make it. All right. In the immortal words of Jeffrey Jones as Emperor Joseph in the movie Amadeus. Well, there it is. Sometimes, there it is. But with all of this talk of what kind of guy, we need a dream man, what can we do? Does this dream man exist for each of us? Lo and behold, there's a mansion in town, this incredible, sprawling $50 million kind of estate, like this is LeBron James, Tom Brady kind of estate. Ooh, is a mysterious buyer. Somebody bought that estate. Well, that somebody turns out to be Jack Nicholson, playing Daryl Van Horn. So Jack Nicholson's character seems at first to be a regular guy, but there's some shit going on with him that would indicate that he's not just a regular guy, and he did not just randomly buy this house. It's as if these three witches, if they're witches, conjured him. Somehow summoned him, if you believe in such things as summoning the devil. Maybe you do and maybe you don't. But Daryl Van Horn is a very crude, rude, intelligent, but the guy, everything is wrong about this guy. As Cher points out, he's rude, he's crass, he's not funny, and he smells. And Jack Nicholson's response to being told by Cher, he is the most unattractive man that she has ever seen. Jack gets a little grin. He blinks his eyes at her and he goes, Alex, would you like to be on the top or the bottom? And I remember watching the movie like, okay, pal. But guess what happens? I got 3 letters for you. What happens after she says he's the most unattractive man she's ever seen, and he insults her by taking her thank you, no, and turning it into, would you like to be on the top or the bottom? Within 30 seconds, Daryl Van Horn and Alexandra, don't even know her last name, they are having sex. Now, if you're a kid who is struggling with your own identity, figuring out, am I ever going to get a date? Is any girl ever going to like me back? What do I do? Woe is me. That's a protocol breach. Bro, woman says she's not interested. Would you like to be on the top or the bottom? Fuck you. But in the world of the movie, we go with it. As it turns out, it's not accidental. His presentation specific to Alexandra was exactly the kind of guy she wanted to get with. She didn't know it. But because Daryl is, maybe he's the devil, or maybe he's just brilliantly intuitive, as she seems to think, he's exactly what she wanted. So it looks like, okay, Jack Nicholson and Cher, what a hot couple. They look great together. But then Jack meets Jane. Jack and Jane. The violinist. The violin orchestra teacher who is very uptight, very prim and proper. She probably hasn't had any sex since she divorced her husband. She also needs something. And Daryl, as if by magic, witchcraft, or some kind of devilish shit, he knows exactly how to approach her to get the mousy, buttoned up Jane to turn into a a sexual creature, almost literally. So they have wild sex. He's incredibly inappropriate with her, and son of a gun, it works there too. Wow. It's good to be Jack, or in the case of this movie, it's good to be Daryl Van Horn, because he's now bedded two of the trifecta. And oddly enough, both Cher and Susan Sarandon's characters are stuck on Daryl. They really like him, but they're okay sharing him because reasons? But when Michelle Pfeiffer's Suki meets Daryl Van Horn, she actually comes out and says, "Are you going to seduce me too?" He says, "Yeah." She says, "How?" He goes, "I don't know." And she points out, she goes, "I get pregnant. I get pregnant. At the drop of a hat, I could probably take a toothbrush and get pregnant." Is that going to dissuade our intrepid Daryl Van Horn from trying to have his way with Suki, aka the lovely Michelle Pfeiffer? Nah. He's going to get there. So, we now have almost a Jules and Jim, Francois Truffaut scenario, although we have, instead of Jules and Jim, we have Alexandra, Suki, Jane, and Daryl. Now, it wouldn't be a movie, it wouldn't be a horror movie, if the rest of the film is the four of them simply having foursomes. There has to be some other plot machinery going on. Well, the women appear to have some kind of otherworldly powers, and they quickly become pariahs in their town because everyone knows what's going on in Van Horn's mansion. There's sex. There's dirty sex. There's all kinds of illicit behavior. Hey, on that one, I'm going to side with Daryl and the ladies. It's none of anyone's business what they decide to do up there. They're all consenting adults. They're all single, and they're not hurting anybody. But Susan Sarandon's Jane goes to town, and she buys some groceries, and the number of times she gets called slut in one very calm, G-rated trip to the grocery, you know what? That's not okay either. She didn't do anything wrong. She's a single woman, and if she wants to hook up with a guy, go fuck yourself. Nobody's ragging on Daryl for nailing all three women. Well, they're probably all afraid of him. So they slowly detach themselves from Jack, and he ain't happy about it. Daryl Van Horn is not happy about it. And Nicholson is very good in these scenes. It's easy to look at Jack in this film and say, well, he just goes nuts from beginning to end. No, he doesn't. He's very precise. It's not something that you pick up the first time seeing the film. Well, now you might because you're watching me prattle about it. But he targets each. He is very methodical with how he approaches each of the three women. There is nothing accidental. The spiel that he puts onto Cher would not have worked with either Susan's character or Michelle's character, in other words. So when the women begin to detach, his reaction is believable. He says, we're not doing anything wrong. We are the best of friends. We really enjoy each other's company. Don't let what other people say impact what you do, but you'll understand why. You know, Alexandra's a single mom. Suki's a single mom. Suki's job might be in jeopardy. She might get fired because, oh my God, she has a guy that she has sex with who is not her husband. Is that a problem? I don't know. Things take a turn for the worse when the women pretty much ghost him. And he does not feel that he deserves to be, well, they don't say ghosted, but he, in this instance, he really hasn't done anything wrong. He didn't bring this on. Yeah, he brought it on. He brought on all the sex and all of the lap of luxury stuff. What did he do wrong? Why won't you women answer your phones? Nowadays, this would be the equivalent of unfollowing and blocking someone on every form of social media and blocking whenever they try to contact and not answering any numbers you don't recognize because it's probably him. So Jack does not have a particularly good reaction to this. He gets very angry and he seems to start to change, like almost showing his natural form of Lucifer, if we believe in such things, and if this entire movie isn't one long fever dream. So the women do not want all of the horrible things that have been happening to them, seems to be Daryl's doing. So they play nice. They play nice. They say, listen, let's call a truce. Nobody needs to we don't need anyone getting hurt. You don't need to hurt any townspeople. Let's just play nice. And so they kind of put one over on him. And that leads to what I believe is the single greatest actor moment of Jack Nicholson's esteemed career. The multiple Oscar winner, absolute fucking legend, Jack Nicholson. There is a scene towards the end of the movie, not coincidentally set in a church, where Jack, as Daryl, goes on an unbelievable screaming tirade about women. And he's targeting God in his tirade. And there is a certain beauty to maybe the devil targeting God in his tirade. And as he says, were women a mistake? Or did he do it to us on purpose? Because I really want to know. Because if it's a mistake, maybe we can do something about it. You know, find a cure, invent a vaccine, build up our immune systems. Get a little exercise, 20 push-ups a day, and you never have to be afflicted with women ever again. But meantime, while he's doing that, they are performing some kind of witchcraft and still fucking with him. So without spoiling the ultimate, the last act of the film, it is a trifle. This was not a movie that was ever going to win Oscars or contend for the major awards. It is a super entertaining ride all the way through. And you certainly don't know if you walk into this completely cold and all you know is that it's called a comedy and it's Jack Nicholson and Cher and Michelle Pfeiffer and Susan Sarandon. You're going to say, oh God, this is going to be great. And it is great, but it's not going to be the movie that you expect unless you do some more reading about it. Oh, it's based on an Updike novel? Oh, well, he's not exactly famed for light reading, is he? No, he's not. The phenomenal, certainly the greatest living film composer, John Williams, performed a very distinctive, he composed and then performed a very distinctive musical score for this film. And in the kind of John Williams pantheon of non-Star Wars, non-Superman, because those are in my opinion, his two masterpieces are Superman and Star Wars, those scores, the originals. His other best scores, I put The Witches of Eastwick, if I had to name 4 off the top of my head, The Witches of Eastwick, Home Alone, Harry Potter, Jurassic Park. Sorry, I got held up with Home Alone. So those 4, to me, of what I've seen, what I've heard, the best non-Star Wars, non-Superman musical scores that John Williams ever crafted. And oddly enough, Witches of Eastwick, Home Alone, and Harry Potter, there are parallels. There are certain motifs in all 3. There are elements of what would be the Home Alone score in Witches of Eastwick, which he did first. So I would say Witches of Eastwick is the most distinctive of all of the non-Superman Star Wars, with the exception of Jurassic Park, which is also entirely all new motifs. The main theme of Jurassic Park is magnificent, as I mentioned on a podcast last week. It is a great musical score. It does so many things right musically, and I'm not a music expert, but I know a great score when I hear it. Williams' score for The Witches of Eastwick is spectacular. And his scores for both Home Alone and, the main themes of the Harry Potter series, just amazing. I mean, he's the best to ever do it. That's not a knock on anybody else, because Bernard Herrmann was a fucking boss. And James Horner was incredible talent. And it's just so terrible he died so young. And Jerry Goldsmith had more musical scores, more film scores than Williams. And some of his best work, it's comparable to what John Williams has done. You listen to, the thing is, some of Goldsmith's best scores, the movies weren't really that great. First Night, an incredible, amazing main theme, just perfect. Movie sucks. And then he has another unbelievable score, Matinee, movie bombed. But the Witches of Eastwick is one of the most entertaining films you will ever see. You will not be bored for a second. You will laugh. You might have moments where you're a little bit fearful and you won't have any idea, how the hell is this going to turn out? You start calculating in your head, what are the stakes here? And what would be the best conceivable happy ending? Is a happy ending even possible? That's what she said. Witches of Eastwick has been on Max for quite some time, and I believe it still is. I don't like to give bad information. We're gonna double check what this is on. I think it's on HBO Max, but I'm going to double check before closing this episode. Just, as I always say, I don't like to give bad information or, now here's an interesting thing. So on the reviews aggregate, the streaming aggregate called Just Watch, the Rotten Tomatoes for Witches of Eastwick is in the high 60s. It's technically fresh. It's not a great score. The Internet Movie Database is in the high 6s. Not that good of a score. But on this one, with thousands of reviews, it's at 90%. That would indicate that the movie has grown in people's appreciation and estimation as time has gone on. So let's see what this is on. Best price. No, it's not free anywhere. That's too bad. Well, might have to pay a couple of bucks. Or, heaven forbid, a little bit of physical media. You can do that too. Nothing wrong with that. Or you could just catch it when it airs on TV. I haven't watched a movie on TV when it was on TV. I don't even know how many years. At least a decade, maybe more. The Witches of Eastwick, 37 years old. Released on June 12, 1987. A great film. A superlative entertainment. And an interesting time capsule of a moment and a time when Jack Nicholson was neither young nor old. I mistakenly thought he was old. He's not old. Ewan McGregor right now is 3 years older than Jack Nicholson was when he made the Witches of Eastwick. McGregor still looks like he's in his 30s. Age is an actual thing, but perception changes how we see. Jack Nicholson was really old to my 14-year-old eyes. And I rejected so much of the movie because it wasn't believable that he could get with these women. Come on. You have nothing to do with the characters in this movie. I understand that now. And I can appreciate the nuance of Jack's performance. It's better than he was given credit for. And maybe that's something that has added to the movie's estimation in terms of how people view it today. Because it's universally lauded as a classic. And when it came out, there were a lot of critics, this movie's not good. Doesn't work. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It can't figure out whether it's a comedy or a horror film. Well, you know what? Be both. I believe the film succeeds at both comedy and horror. This has been episode 216 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday morning with me here in New York. If you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 217 real soon. Till then, peace.